What makes podcast interviews worth listening to? Two things. You want to know? Let's talk about it. What's up, pod influencers? My name is Ozil, and I want to welcome you to the Podcast Influence YouTube channel, where I help you amplify your influence with podcasting. And on this channel, I'm going to share with you tips, insights, and strategies on how you, my friend, can pro up your podcast with style and influence. And on today's video, I'm going to share with you two key ingredients for making a great podcast interview worth listening to. Now, if you are an interview-based podcaster or looking to launch your own podcast that's going to be involving interviewing other guests, you want to hear me out. You want to listen to this because, let's face it, we have listened to podcasts and they're boring and they're just, I feel like the podcast interviewer is rambling on and they're just not interesting. Let's be real here, right? There's some content out there, especially in the podcasting world, that's just boring, right? And it is my obligation, my promise to you that to help you become a better podcast interviewer. This is something that I'm very heavily invested in how can we become better podcast hosts. So these are two ingredients I want to share with you that will make your podcast interviews a lot more enticing and worth listening to. All right, number one is context. I believe that before you reach out to a potential guest to be on your podcast, or before you press that record button, you need to ask yourself this one question. What is this podcast episode about? But more importantly, what is the listener going to get out of this podcast interview? Remember, it's important to be interested and not interesting. And part of being interested is being interested in the context, in the value, and the takeaway that your listener will get out of this episode. So I think a lot of times podcasters, they think about themselves and they just say, well, this is my show and I'm going to talk about what I want to talk about. Yes, it's your show. We get it. But at the end of the day, you are trying to build an audience, my friend, build influence. And in order to do that, you have to keep the listener in mind. So having context in what the podcast episode is going to be about is vital to making an interview interesting. If you don't have context and it's going to be talking about, fitness and mindset and entrepreneurship all in one episode, well, you've lost interest. You're not going to, that copy, that headline won't capture anybody's attention. And number one, and also you're going to confuse the listener when they start listening to the podcast interview because you're going to go all over the place. Now, some people may like that, but for the majority of people, they want to get one takeaway. So think about it like, what's this one single-minded message takeaway that I want my listeners to get out of this particular episode? If you go into your podcast interview like that, trust me, it will make your podcast interviews much more interesting to the listener. All right, so if context is king, I like to refer as conversation being queen, okay? Let me break it down for you. Context, right? This is the takeaway. This is what the listener will get out of this particular episode. But now we're going to immerse ourselves in the art of the interview. And I think to me, the art of the interview embodies a conversational flow. Two people getting together and just having a conversation about the topic. And a lot of the times, podcast interviews, or interviewers rather, will just not be present and not become an active listener. They're just over talking and they want to share. And they kind of take on this thing of like, I'm a podcaster, this is my show, and I'm going to interject every single time because I'm so excited about this. And I'm here to tell you is you got to hold the reins a little bit, relax, chill out. At the end of the day, when you interview somebody, they are the rock star of the show. They are your guest, and you're bringing them because you are extracting a piece of value, a takeaway, a teachable lesson for your listeners, right? Your job is to bring value to your listeners. What can they get out of this conversation? So if you are a podcast interviewer, here's a big tip. Let them do the talking, okay? The more talking they do, the better the interviewer or the interview becomes, okay? Point blank. Don't overstep your boundaries. Be an active listener. Listen to what they're saying. You may have a list of questions, but you may not get to all of them. And I'm here to let you know that that's okay. That's fine. We don't have to go and bombard this interview or overload this interview with all of the questions. If you don't get to them, it's okay. Let the conversation be at a flow state. Let the conversation flow, and you're guiding the ship, right? You are the interviewer guiding it, so you know what you want to get out of it. But allow them to share and become an active listener, to take bits and pieces of what they say to take it into a different direction. Okay, so it's very, very important. You don't want to fill your interview with a bunch of filler questions. And you want to make sure that, again, that it's flowing, it's a conversation, because let's face it, some of the best interviews, and I know for me, have been the ones that are just really casual, they're free flowing, and they're not A, B, C, D, E, right? They're not structured, they're flowing. So again, conversation is queen, and I think if you keep that in mind going into the interview, and even letting your guests know, hey, listen, this is just a conversation about this particular topic. Okay, let's just relax, and it's just two friends, recording a conversation, but just relax. It's not an interview, and I think that's a great way to approach any particular interview. The big takeaway here is that nobody wants to listen to a boring interview, but people, your listeners, do want to listen to a great conversation that has context and has flow, and it's casual and it's fun, and it's not so rigid in the questions and in the content that you're delivering to your audience. If you keep that in mind, trust me, you will 10x your interviewing skill set, which I believe that we can all benefit from. And it not only will it make for better podcasting, but your audience will love you for that. All right, so hopefully you got some value out of that. Leave me a comment in the section down below. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you agree or if you disagree. Let me know what you're doing to level up your podcast interviewing skill set. It's important. And of course, if you dig the content, please hit that subscribe button, hit the notification button to be first in line for all the latest content. All right, hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, peace and one love.